Viewers, the big story at 5 o'clock that we are focusing on this evening is Strait of Hormuz, a very, very important pathway located between Oman and Iran, and how it facilitates 20% of global oil and LNG exports, the only maritime route for oil-rich Gulf states. Now, how this is getting impacted because of the war that we are witnessing in the Middle East, and because of this, why the oil prices are rising. Remember, Brent already is on fire. Brent has crossed $80 per barrel, which is definitely not a good news for a country like India. But what comes next? That's something that we are going to be decoding for you in the first segment of Breaking Ground at 5 o'clock this evening. Now, viewers, a commander in Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps has said that Strait of Hormuz is closed and has warned that any vessel attempting to pass through is going to be attacked. Now, this has led to rise in insurance premium for ships, making them wary of crossing it. Ships right now are stranded, oil prices are rising. Last evening, Donald Trump, the US president, said that US will take immediate steps to safeguard maritime trade in the Gulf region. He said he has ordered US Development Finance Corporation to provide political risk insurance at a very reasonable price. He even announced that US Navy could begin escorting tankers to the strategically critical Strait of Hormuz if necessary. But will that help? That's something that we are going to be discussing with our special guest this evening. But first up, listen in to what US President Donald Trump said.
The United States is conducting an operation to eliminate the threat of Iran's short-range ballistic missiles and the threat posed by their Navy. The objectives of this operation are to destroy their ballistic missile capability and make sure they can't rebuild it, and make sure that they can't hide behind that to have a nuclear program.
Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities. Second, we're annihilating their Navy. We've knocked out already 10 ships. Third, we're ensuring that the world's #1 sponsor of terror can never obtain a nuclear weapon. And finally, we're ensuring that the Iranian regime cannot continue to arm, fund, and direct terrorist armies outside of their borders.
Now, viewers, let's explain to you why this particular pathway, the Strait of Hormuz that I'm talking about, why if this gets blocked, which is the condition, which is the case right now, why this is a big cause of concern for India. Now, there are 37 Indian flagged ships that are currently stranded around it, and this is the reason why India is concerned. As per reports, there are 1,109 sailors who are stuck in the Persian Gulf, as per reports, and hence it's a big cause of concern. So our concern is seafarers and, of course, the ships that are stranded. It is a crucial pathway, viewers, for 40% of the crude that comes from Middle East to India. It is, something that is leading to a rise in fuel prices, in crude prices, in Brent crude. Now, according to Kepler, 100 million barrels. This is the commercial crude oil stock that's currently with India, and this can easily cover 40 to 45 days. It will look after, our energy needs, our oil needs for 40 to 45 days in case it is a short-term disruption. But if this pathway, viewers, the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, remains in the current state for a longer time, then it is a big worry for an oil importer like India. Remember, 88%, in fact, of our oil needs currently are, met by the import of oil. Now, Iran has issued a warning. If anyone tries to pass, Revolutionary Guards and regular Navy will set those ships ablaze. This is the warning that has come from Iran. Trump, however, says that US is going to escort tankers through Strait of Hormuz in case it is required. Ships are scared to cross because there is a warning that has come from Iran. Insurers have also increased the war risk premium. It's getting expensive. And that's the reason why Trump has promised yesterday that insurance will be given to ships at a very reasonable price. Now, Is it easier said than done? I mean, I don't know. Let's try and understand from our guest who is joining us on Breaking Ground this evening. We have Ameena Bakr, head of Middle East Energy Plus and OPEC Plus Insights at Kepler. Thank you very much, Ms. Ameena, for speaking with us here on Times Now. It's day 5 of the war. There is a crisis across Middle East, but I want to specifically talk to you about Strait of Hormuz, its current state, the option that has been given by US President Donald Trump, and what does all of this really mean for the energy prices, oil prices going forward?
Thank you so much for having me on the show. And the Strait of Hormuz is at the center of what we're watching right now. As you rightfully said, 20% of global supplies flows through the strait. And what we've been seeing at Kepler and monitoring is a standstill. As you rightfully said as well, that vessels are just too scared to cross the strait. In fact, the only vessels that we're seeing are Iranian vessels. I did see the announcement by Trump yesterday, and we just had actually a group of our experts at Kepler discuss this in a webinar that was viewed, and our view is that basically it is easier said than done, and it's a really expensive option that he's giving here, escorting vessels, and it's still unclear what he's talking about. Is he talking about vessels belonging to national oil companies, international oil companies, trading firms? How is this going to work? Even the details here out of the Gulf states, I try to understand if any communication has been given. It appears that there are no details about this plan, and it seems like a really costly plan, because the main risk here is being hit by a missile from Iran, and we saw repeated threats this morning from the Revolutionary Guard that this is exactly what they plan to do.
Do you have an idea as to how many ships, perhaps are stranded right now? Because traffic clearly has tanked from, 28th of February when the war really started. And any assessment of, for how long it could really continue like this? Because I believe for China, there is no such restriction.
You're right about the monitoring of the timeline. This is something, again, there are many questions around. It's so uncertain here. You mentioned that it's day 5 in this conflict, and I'm here in Dubai, and we're still hearing blasts happen on a daily basis, and across the region. You still had facilities today, again, in Saudi Arabia, in Ras Laffan, being targeted. So the conflict is very much ongoing. If we want to go with the timeline that President Trump said, he said 4 to 5 weeks, which seems like a long time from now. And on the ships being stranded, we estimate something like 240 some ships are stranded. This represents roughly 6% of the global vessel number around the world. So quite a number of ships stranded.
Okay, quite a number of ships stranded. And if this disruption were to continue for 4 weeks, what happens to the prices of Brent? Do we have any estimate there?
To be frank with you, I disagree that, the price is rising beyond, control. I think Brent prices have been actually underestimating the risks that we're seeing. $82 in an extreme environment where you have limited to no flows out of Hormuz. You have shut-ins from Iraq. Iraq can't deliver its oil, can't export its oil, and its storage is full. So they had to announce cuts of 1.45 million barrels per day. You have a situation where there's no clear timeline on when this conflict will end or what the end game is. Just hearing from what's happening in Iran on the ground, it seems like there is no sign of a revolution per se, no sign of a regime change. So with all these uncertainties, I'm surprised that Brent is still at 82. So with a prolonged conflict, I think the market is going to come to realize that we are going to be facing a supply disruption, a supply disruption is real, and there isn't enough spare capacity globally to make up for this disruption. It's an expensive thing to reroute oil through other channels. So this realization is just going to elevate prices way beyond levels that we're seeing today.
Okay, you're saying you're surprised at Brent being around $82 a barrel. In fact, IRGC's commander-in-chief has reportedly said, and I'm quoting him here, "We will also attack oil pipelines, will not allow a single drop of oil to leave the region. Oil price will reach $200 in the coming days." How concerned are you with this kind of a statement?
It is a possibility that we do see three-digit oil prices if this conflict persists, and if we are really, I mean, the market comes to realize that the disruption is real. The threat of Iran is definitely real. I can tell you, just being based out of this region, that the attacks are continuing. There seems to be a concentration, especially in the Gulf states. I mean, the targeting of facilities in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait. This trend could continue if Trump doesn't bring an end to it.
Okay, and can you also talk to us a little bit about any alternatives that countries have, say, for example, for Saudi Arabia, for India? Saudi Arabia is the second largest supplier of crude oil after Iraq. And is there an alternative, another route perhaps that Saudis can really consider if this continues?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the contingency plan in Saudi Arabia is using the East-West pipeline. The capacity of that pipeline is around 7 million barrels a day. The export ports that are based out of the West, like Yanbu, for example, they have the capacity to export something like 5.5 million barrels a day. We haven't seen those numbers being tested. So this is a situation where we could actually see what could go through or what not. I mean, out of the West ports, the most, at least according to our Kepler data, we saw come out of there historically was something like 2 million barrels per day. But we understand that Aramco is diverting more of its crude from the east to the west to be sent through the channel or through the Yanbu port.
How vulnerable is India amidst all of this?
India is very vulnerable. I think India is more vulnerable than China, for example. You mentioned in your report around the cover that India has. We estimate it, yes, to be something like 30 to 40 days
40
cover.
to 45,
China has a bigger,
I guess. 100 million barrels,
40 to 45 days of cover. And that, I mean, compared to China, for example, China has a bigger cover than that. And I think India is just exposed to higher prices in general. It's more sensitive to the higher price. We even heard in terms of LNG with Qatar's announcement that they're stopping their facility in Ras Laffan. India is considering sourcing LNG from Russia. So I'm sure India has its contingency plans in place, but it is one of the very vulnerable countries in this conflict. And it's really important to note that a conflict that happens in this region is not a regional conflict. This is a global conflict, and all countries need to come together and to bring an end to it.
Okay. Now, it's not for the first time that we have seen this kind of a disruption when it comes to Strait of Hormuz. Can you give us an example of how this situation impacted the world and their energy requirement in the past?
Well, this is the first time that we see these extreme kind of uncertainties around it, or complete blockade. I think I was just reading this morning, and I need to check myself, but it's this is the second time after World War II that the U.S. offers escorts, vessels, security escorts through the Strait of Hormuz. So it's not something that is commonly or a frequent event that the world had to deal with, and it's really going to test the US's ability and budget in order to secure this channel and make sure that oil supplies continue to flow.
One last question before I let you go. Do you think perhaps this could push India back to, looking at Russia as, another important supplier of oil? Because over the last few months, we had seen the amount of oil we import, crude we import, going down from Russia and increasing from other countries like Iraq and Saudi, how the share had gone down. Do you think if this continues, India will have to perhaps go back to Russia?
Personally, I think, yes, that's the case. And I think India is a country with a leadership that values its national interests. It would put its people first and will make sure that energy supplies are secured no matter what the source is. And I think India's position during Trump's kind of pressure of not buying buying Russian barrels was very, very clear that the priority here is the country, the priority is the people, and if it means going back to sourcing LNG or crude from Russia, I think it's a viable option.
All right, we leave it there. Ms. Ameena Bakr, appreciate you speaking with us here on Times Now and sharing with us your perspective on what to really make of the disruption that we are seeing as far as Strait of Hormuz is concerned. Thank you for joining us today.